Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. How many dreams have been delayed? How many destinies have been detoured? Not by what we didn't know, but by what we said when we should have stayed silent. Words are powerful. Scripture tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue, yet too often we hand that power away without a second thought. We talk when we should listen. We react when we should reflect. We vent when we should pray. There are moments when silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. There are seasons when zipping your mouth is the very thing that protects your purpose, because not everyone needs access to your thoughts, your plans, or your process. God will give you a vision, but He won't always give you permission to broadcast it. Some blessings need time in the dark before they're strong enough to stand in the light. See, discipline isn't just about what you do with your hands or where you place your feet. It's about what you allow to escape your mouth. The enemy doesn't always come to steal your future. Sometimes he waits for you to talk yourself out of it. One careless sentence can undo years of preparation. One emotional outburst can cost a divine opportunity. But here's the good news. When you learn to master your mouth, you begin to unlock a new level of strength. Silence sharpens discernment. Restraint builds character. And when you finally do speak, your words carry weight, authority, and purpose. Faith grows in quiet places. Confidence is forged when you trust God enough to wait, to listen, and to hold your peace. Today is about understanding that zipping your mouth doesn't silence your power, it focuses it. It aligns you with God's timing, God's wisdom, and God's will. And when the moment comes to speak, heaven itself stands at attention. Words are not just sounds carried by air. They are forces that shape atmosphere, direction, and destiny. From the very beginning, the world was not formed by hands, but by speech. God spoke, and chaos aligned. Light appeared because a word was released with authority and intention. That same principle is alive today. Every word you speak carries weight, whether you recognize it or not. Words activate faith or fuel fear. They can build bridges or burn futures before they ever begin. What you consistently say eventually becomes what you believe, and what you believe determines how you move. Speak doubt long enough, and it will sit in your spirit like a permanent resident. Speak fear often enough, and it will start making decisions on your behalf. But when your words align with faith, they begin to shift internal posture before external circumstances ever change. That's why careless speech is never harmless. Even jokes, when repeated, can become agreements. Even complaints, when rehearsed, can become confessions. The tongue is small, but it directs outcomes. One sentence can change a relationship. One statement can alter a reputation. One declaration can give courage to a weary soul or crush a fragile one. That's why wisdom teaches restraint before reaction. When emotions run high, words tend to outrun truth. You may feel justified in the moment, but words spoken without control often require years to repair. Silence in those moments isn't suppression, it's stewardship. Faith-filled people must understand that spiritual battles are often won or lost through speech. The enemy doesn't always attack with opposition. Sometimes he simply waits for agreement. Negative words, spoken repeatedly, become invitations. They give permission for limitation, discouragement, and stagnation to settle in. That's why aligning your mouth with hope, even when circumstances disagree, is an act of spiritual resistance. You don't deny reality, but you refuse to empower it with hopeless language. Words also shape identity. What you speak over yourself becomes the lens through which you see your capacity. Call yourself weak long enough, and strength feels foreign. Label yourself broken and healing feels unreachable. But when you speak truth, even quietly, even imperfectly, something begins to rise. Confidence doesn't always start as a feeling. Sometimes it starts as a declaration made in faith before evidence appears. There is also timing in speech. A good word spoken at the wrong moment can lose its power. Truth without wisdom can wound instead of heal. That's why discernment must guide expression. Not every truth needs to be spoken immediately, and not every thought deserves a voice. Mature faith knows when to speak life and when to remain still, trusting that God works even when no words are released. Your words reveal what you honor. They expose what you trust. They signal whether your faith is rooted in circumstance or anchored in something higher. When pressure comes, whatever is stored inside will surface through speech. That's why preparation matters long before the test arrives. Guarding your words daily is not about perfection, it's about direction. Every sentence is a seed, and seeds always produce after their kind. Silence is often misunderstood because the world confuses noise with strength and volume with confidence. From an early age, we are taught that to be seen, we must speak, and to be respected, we must respond. But there is a deeper wisdom that understands that silence, when chosen intentionally, is not weakness at all. It is control. It is awareness. It is the ability to stand firm without needing to prove anything to anyone. Strategic silence creates space for discernment. When you are quiet, you are able to observe what words would otherwise distract you from seeing. You notice motives. You recognize patterns. You hear what people are really saying beneath what they are expressing. Silence sharpens perception, and perception protects purpose. Many mistakes are not made because of a lack of information, but because of a lack of patience long enough to process it. There are moments when speaking too soon exposes you to unnecessary resistance. Not every plan needs an announcement. Not every move needs an explanation. Some things grow best in private, protected from premature opinions and unqualified criticism. Silence becomes a shield, guarding vision until it is strong enough to stand on its own. What God reveals to you is not always meant to be immediately revealed through you. Silence also disarms conflict. When emotions rise, words can become weapons. A quick response might feel powerful, but it often escalates what could have dissolved through restraint. Choosing not to speak in heated moments interrupts cycles of reaction. It shifts the atmosphere. It forces others to confront their own behavior without being able to hide behind your response. Silence, in that sense, becomes a mirror. There is strength in not defending yourself against every accusation. When your identity is secure, you don't need to chase every misunderstanding. Silence allows truth to surface on its own. Over time, consistency speaks louder than explanations ever could. People may question your quiet in the moment, but they will respect the fruit it produces in the long run. In faith, silence is often where trust is tested. When prayers feel unanswered and clarity feels delayed, the temptation is to fill the gap with worry-filled words. But silence before God is not emptiness, it is expectation. It is the posture of listening rather than demanding. Many divine instructions are missed because the noise of impatience drowns out the whisper of guidance. Strategic silence also strengthens self-mastery. The ability to hold your tongue when you are provoked is evidence of inner authority. Anyone can react. Not everyone can restrain. Restraint requires confidence because you must believe that you don't need immediate validation. You trust that your actions, your consistency, and your faith will speak on your behalf. Silence does not mean avoidance, and it does not mean fear. It means timing. It means knowing that words released too early can weaken impact, while words released at the right moment can shift everything. There is a season to speak and a season to remain quiet, and wisdom is knowing the difference and having the discipline to honor it. Not everyone is meant to have access to what God has placed inside you. Vision is sacred, and anything sacred must be handled with care. Too often, people expose their dreams to environments that are not equipped to nurture them. They share future plans with individuals who are comfortable with where they are and uncomfortable with where you're going. Access, when given too freely, can become interference. Every vision has a developmental stage. In its early form, it is fragile, not because it lacks potential, but because it lacks maturity. Premature exposure invites opinions before preparation has had time to do its work. Some people will question what they don't understand. Others will criticize what they cannot imagine themselves doing. Their skepticism is not always personal, but it can still be damaging if you allow it too close to your spirit. God often reveals purpose in fragments. He gives enough to move forward, but not always enough to explain. When you try to fully articulate an incomplete revelation, it can sound confusing even to you. That confusion can then be mirrored back by others, amplifying doubt. Protecting your vision means allowing it to become clear in private before attempting to clarify it in public. There is also a difference between support and curiosity. Some people ask about your plans not because they want to help, but because they want information. Information can be misused. It can be distorted, repeated out of context, or turned into comparison. Not everyone who smiles at your dream is rooting for its success. Discernment teaches you to recognize who is assigned to nurture your growth and who is simply observing it. Access should be earned through trust, alignment, and proven character. Those who have walked through fire with you, prayed with you, and shown consistency during quiet seasons have demonstrated the capacity to handle your vision responsibly. Others may celebrate you later, but that does not mean they are entitled to insight now. Privacy is not secrecy, it is stewardship. Even well-meaning people can become obstacles when they speak into a calling they were never meant to guide. Advice given without understanding the assignment can redirect focus and dilute conviction. When too many voices speak into one vision, clarity becomes compromised. What began as obedience can slowly turn into people pleasing if boundaries are not established. Jesus himself modeled selective access. He taught the crowds, but he revealed deeper truths to a few. He healed publicly, but he processed privately. That pattern was not arrogance, it was wisdom. Depth requires intimacy, and intimacy requires trust. When access is limited, growth is accelerated because energy is not wasted managing unnecessary opinions. Protecting your vision is also about protecting your faith. When you constantly explain what God has spoken, you may feel pressured to defend it before it has manifested. That pressure can erode confidence and create the need for validation. Silence preserves belief. It allows obedience to remain pure, rooted in trust rather than approval. Your vision does not need universal understanding to be divinely appointed. It needs obedience, patience, and protection. When the time is right, what was once hidden will speak for itself, and those who never had access will still recognize its impact. Discipline is often measured by visible actions, but its true test is revealed in the unseen moments when restraint is required. Controlling the tongue is one of the highest forms of discipline because it demands awareness, patience, and humility all at once. It requires you to pause between impulse and expression, choosing wisdom over momentary release. Anyone can speak what they feel, but discipline speaks what aligns with purpose. The tongue is directly connected to emotion, and emotion rarely consults logic before demanding a response. When frustration, anger, or excitement rises, words want to rush out unfiltered. Discipline interrupts that process. It asks whether what you're about to say will build or break, clarify or confuse, heal or harm. That pause, though brief, is powerful. It transforms reaction into intention. Uncontrolled speech often reveals a lack of inner order. When thoughts are scattered and emotions are unmanaged, words become reckless. Discipline brings structure to the internal world, and that structure reflects in speech. You begin to speak less, but with greater impact. You stop explaining unnecessarily and start expressing deliberately. The need to always have the last word fades when you trust that consistency will speak louder over time. There is a cost to undisciplined speech. Relationships fracture, opportunities disappear, trust erodes. Many doors don't close because of lack of talent or effort, but because of a moment where words were spoken without foresight. Discipline understands that every conversation is an opportunity to either advance or delay purpose. Words leave a residue, and people remember how you made them feel long after they forget what was said. Controlling the tongue also requires humility. Sometimes silence is chosen not because you lack the answer, but because you recognize that being right is less important than being effective. Discipline doesn't seek to dominate conversations. It seeks to elevate outcomes. It understands that correction without compassion breeds resistance, and truth without timing loses influence. In spiritual growth, discipline of speech becomes evidence of maturity. Faith is not just professed, it is practiced in restraint. When pressure increases, whatever is most developed will surface. If discipline is present, calm replaces chaos. If it is absent, words become weapons. That is why preparation matters before conflict arrives. You don't develop control in the heat of the moment, you reveal it. Daily habits shape verbal discipline. What you listen to, what you dwell on, and what you repeatedly rehearse internally will eventually escape through speech. Discipline begins in thought life before it ever reaches the mouth. Guarding your mind is part of guarding your tongue. When your internal dialogue is aligned with truth and patience, your external dialogue follows. Discipline also teaches when to speak boldly. Controlling the tongue does not mean shrinking back or avoiding necessary conversations. It means speaking with clarity, courage, and respect. It means addressing issues directly without allowing emotion to hijack the message. Discipline gives words authority because they are not driven by impulse, but by intention. When discipline governs speech, trust increases. People learn that your words are measured, not reckless. They listen when you speak because they know you don't speak carelessly. Over time, your voice carries weight, not because it is loud, but because it is consistent and reliable. Emotional speech often feels justified because it is rooted in what feels real in the moment. When emotions are stirred, words rush forward demanding expression, convincing you that release equals relief. But emotions are temporary, and words are permanent. What is spoken in a moment of anger, fear, or frustration can echo far beyond the feeling that inspired it. Destiny is rarely derailed by lack of ability. It is often delayed by moments where emotion was allowed to speak louder than wisdom. Strong emotions narrow perspective. When you speak from that place, you are responding to how something feels, not to what it means. Fear exaggerates obstacles. Anger distorts intent. Pride resists correction. Words spoken under those influences are rarely accurate, but they are always impactful. One emotional response can alter how people perceive your character, your maturity, and your readiness for responsibility. Opportunities that took years to prepare for can be placed on hold because of one unguarded moment. Emotional speech also creates unnecessary battles. Many conflicts escalate not because the issue is complex, but because words were fueled by feeling instead of clarity. A defensive tone invites resistance. A reactive statement hardens positions. When emotion leads the conversation, Resolution becomes secondary to self-expression. Destiny requires alignment, and alignment is difficult when relationships are strained by careless words. There is also a spiritual dimension to emotional speech. When emotions dominate, faith often takes a back seat. Fear-filled words can cancel courage. Doubt-filled statements can weaken resolve. Complaints repeated long enough can shift focus from purpose to pressure. You may still be moving forward physically, but emotionally spoken words can slow internal momentum, creating hesitation where confidence once lived. Timing is critical to purpose, and emotional speech often disrupts timing. Saying too much too soon to the wrong person can expose plans prematurely. Speaking out of frustration can reveal vulnerabilities that should have been protected. Emotional honesty without discernment can become self-sabotage. Not every feeling needs an audience, and not every thought deserves to be verbalized. Emotional speech also conditions future behavior. The more often you speak without restraint, the easier it becomes. Patterns form. People begin to expect volatility instead of stability. Trust becomes fragile. Leaders, in particular, are measured not by how passionately they feel, but by how consistently they respond. Destiny demands reliability, and reliability is proven through controlled expression. Learning to pause is one of the most powerful disciplines a person can develop. That pause creates space between feeling and response. It allows truth to rise above impulse. In that space, you remember who you are, what you're called to, and what's at stake. Silence in emotional moments is not denial, it is decision-making. It is choosing long-term purpose over short-term relief. Emotions are not enemies, they are indicators. They signal what matters, what hurts, what needs attention. But indicators are meant to inform, not to lead. When emotions take the lead, words become reactions instead of responses. Destiny requires response. It requires intention, patience, and vision that extends beyond the present moment. Those who learn to master emotional speech gain a strategic advantage. They are not easily provoked. They are not controlled by atmosphere. They can stand in pressure without leaking frustration through their words. That control preserves credibility and positions them for trust, influence, and responsibility. Emotional restraint does not silence authenticity. It protects purpose while growth continues uninterrupted. Faith is often imagined as something loud and expressive, but some of its deepest growth happens in quiet, unseen spaces. When everything around you demands explanation, reaction, and reassurance, choosing quiet can feel uncomfortable. Yet it is in those moments of stillness that faith stretches beyond feeling and becomes trust. Quiet seasons strip away distractions and force reliance on something greater than visible progress. When noise fades, reflection begins. In quiet, you confront doubts you normally drown out with activity. You become aware of fears you've avoided naming. Faith grows when you sit with those realities instead of escaping them. Silence creates room for honesty, and honesty deepens trust. You begin to recognize that belief is not sustained by constant affirmation, but by a steady commitment even when affirmation is absent. Quiet seasons often feel unproductive because there is little external validation. No applause, no immediate results, no visible movement. But faith is not measured by motion, it is measured by obedience. Trust is developed when you continue showing up, praying, believing, and preparing without confirmation that anything is changing. That unseen consistency builds spiritual muscle. There are times when God seems silent, and in those moments, faith is refined. You learn the difference between hearing and trusting. When answers are delayed, the temptation is to fill the silence with worry-filled words or frantic action. But quiet teaches patience. It teaches you to listen more closely, not just for direction, but for alignment. You learn to distinguish between your own desires and divine instruction. Faith that grows in quiet is not dependent on circumstance. It is anchored internally. When everything external is calm, belief feels easy. But when things are uncertain and you choose restraint over complaint, faith deepens. Silence becomes a declaration of trust. It says that even without clarity, you believe something is happening beneath the surface. Quiet seasons also realign priorities. Without constant noise, you begin to see what truly matters. You stop chasing affirmation and start seeking purpose. Faith matures when it is no longer driven by outcome, but by relationship. You learn to value presence over performance, obedience over visibility. In quiet, faith becomes personal. It is no longer borrowed from sermons, conversations, or collective energy. It becomes yours. You wrestle with questions. You revisit promises. You confront disappointment. And through that process, belief either strengthens or fades. When faith survives quiet, it becomes resilient. Quiet also sharpens spiritual sensitivity. When you're not constantly speaking, planning, or explaining, you become more aware of subtle guidance. Small nudges become clearer. Discernment increases. Faith grows because you begin to recognize direction that would have been missed in noise. Many people abandon faith in quiet seasons because they mistake silence for absence. But growth often looks invisible before it looks powerful. Roots grow underground before branches break the surface. Quiet is not punishment, it is preparation. Faith developed there is not easily shaken because it was forged without reliance on external reinforcement. Those who embrace quiet learn to wait without weakening. They resist the urge to force outcomes. They trust timing without needing control. Faith in quiet is not passive. It is disciplined. It requires restraint, patience, and the courage to believe without proof. That kind of faith carries depth, stability, and endurance that cannot be manufactured in noise. Restraint is often overlooked because it does not announce itself. It does not demand attention or applause, yet it quietly shapes character in powerful ways. When you choose not to react, not to speak, not to defend, something internal is being strengthened. That strength is discernment, the ability to perceive clearly without being clouded by emotion or ego. Restraint slows the moment down long enough for wisdom to catch up. Discernment requires space, and restraint creates that space. When you immediately respond to every stimulus, you surrender control to whatever provoked you. Restraint reclaims authority. It allows you to observe before you engage. In that pause, patterns become visible. Motives surface. You begin to understand not just what is happening, but why it is happening. Discernment grows when you stop reacting and start interpreting. Character is formed in moments where no one would blame you for reacting. Anyone can justify an outburst when they feel wronged. Anyone can excuse harsh words when emotions are high. But restraint chooses integrity over impulse. It chooses long-term alignment over short-term satisfaction. Each time you practice restraint, you reinforce a standard for yourself, and that standard becomes your character. Restraint also reveals maturity. Immaturity seeks immediate expression. Maturity considers consequence. When you restrain yourself, you demonstrate that you are not governed by your environment. You are not controlled by pressure or provocation. That stability builds trust. People may not always understand your silence, but they will respect your consistency. Discernment sharpens as restraint becomes habitual. You begin to recognize which battles matter and which distractions are designed to drain energy. Not every opportunity to speak is an assignment. Not every confrontation deserves engagement. Restraint teaches you to conserve strength for what truly matters. You stop wasting words on situations that cannot be changed and invest them where impact is possible. Character strengthened by restraint is not passive. It is intentional. It requires confidence to remain calm when you could easily dominate a conversation. It requires self-awareness to recognize when your desire to speak is driven by ego rather than purpose. Restraint exposes motives. It forces you to ask whether your words are meant to heal, to help, or simply to be heard. Restraint also protects clarity. When emotions are high, discernment is often low. Silence allows emotions to settle so truth can rise. In that stillness, decisions become wiser. You see beyond the moment and consider the broader implications of your actions. Restraint ensures that decisions are guided by values, not by temporary feelings. Over time, restraint builds a reputation of reliability. People learn that you are not easily swayed or manipulated. They trust your judgment because it is not reactive. Discernment earns credibility when it is consistently exercised with restraint. Your words carry weight because they are not frequent or impulsive. Restraint strengthens internal discipline. It trains the mind and spirit to work together instead of competing for control. You become less reactive, more reflective. Less defensive, more discerning. Character formed this way is not brittle. It is grounded. It can withstand pressure without cracking because it has been reinforced through repeated choices to pause, to listen, and to wait. In a culture that rewards immediacy, restraint feels countercultural. Yet it is precisely this quality that distinguishes depth from noise. Discernment sharpened through restraint allows you to navigate complexity with wisdom, protecting purpose while shaping a character that remains steady under pressure. Timing gives words their true authority. Speech that is aligned with purpose is not rushed, and it is not delayed out of fear. It is released when intention, wisdom, and opportunity converge. Many people speak truth, but few understand timing, and timing determines whether words are received as guidance or resisted as noise. When speech is synchronized with purpose, it carries clarity instead of confusion. God's purpose operates on seasons. There is a time to prepare, a time to wait, and a time to speak. When words are released outside of their season, they can weaken impact rather than strengthen it. Speaking too early can expose vision before it is protected. Speaking too late can miss the moment when hearts are open. Discernment of timing transforms speech into an instrument of alignment. Purpose-driven speech is intentional. It does not seek reaction, it seeks transformation. It is not fueled by emotion, ego, or the need to be heard. It is guided by conviction and clarity. When words are spoken from this place, they resonate beyond the surface. They land because they are anchored in something greater than opinion. Aligned speech requires listening before speaking, listening to God, to context, and to the people involved. Without listening, words risk becoming assumptions. With listening, words become precise. Timing sharpens accuracy. It ensures that speech addresses the real issue rather than the visible symptom. There are moments when silence is the highest form of alignment. Holding back words is not hesitation, it is obedience. Purpose sometimes advances more through restraint than through expression. When you trust timing, you trust that silence is working even when nothing is being said. That trust deepens faith and prevents premature interference. When the moment to speak arrives, aligned words carry authority because they are not excessive. They are measured. They are clear. They do not need to convince. They reveal. People recognize when words are spoken from alignment rather than impulse. There is weight behind them. They shift atmosphere and direction. Time speech also protects relationships. Even truth, when delivered without timing, can damage trust. Purpose-driven words consider the heart of the listener. They seek restoration, not dominance. Timing ensures that words build bridges instead of walls. Alignment also requires courage. Waiting to speak can be uncomfortable, especially when you see injustice, misunderstanding, or potential. But courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is found in restraint, in trusting that the right moment will come. And when it does, purpose ensures that speech is effective rather than reactive. Purpose-aligned speech does not rely on repetition. It does not need to argue. It stands firm in clarity. When words are spoken at the right time, they settle rather than stir. They bring direction instead of distraction. Timing transforms speech from mere expression into assignment. Those who understand alignment are not silent out of fear, nor vocal out of insecurity. They speak when speech serves purpose. They wait when waiting serves growth. Their words do not chase relevance, they carry it. In alignment, speech becomes a tool for order, direction, and fulfillment, moving purpose forward with precision and impact.